folks, and welcome to this week's review. And yes, we have a review. Reviews are back. Don't know for how long because I've got other things planned, but even so, we're looking at a DAC in this particular video from a company based in Shenzhen in China called, to be kind, Lavaudio or Lavaudio. Not sure if they've thought that one through. Anyway, this one is called the DS601. Now I say Lavaudio, but the parent company is in fact someone called OneMi or OneMe Technologies Limited, who produce a whole host of kit, including things like headphones and earphones and cables and Bluetooth receivers and Bluetooth transmitters and microphones and Bluetooth speakers for your car and DACs. So Lavaudio is but one part of a larger empire, so to speak. And yeah, if you want a small slice of cultural difference between the West and the Chinese culture itself, go to the website, change the company's website language to Chinese, and click on the far top left from where I'm standing, or from over there from where you're standing, and see how the company presents its tech to the Chinese public via the deeply trad webpage furniture. Designed for desktop use, the DS601 looks like, well, it looks like an Apple TV in terms of its chassis basic size and shape. And I'm starting already to go into techie stuff, so it's time, isn't it? It's time that we took a closer look. And welcome to the closer look section for the DS601 DAC from Lavaudio. And as you can see in front of you, it's a pretty dinky little thing, as I say, about the size of a typical Apple TV unit. The front of the chassis here, well, that's pretty bare apart from labeling. So let's quickly ignore the front and let's spin around to look at the rear. And we'll take a left to right gaze. And we can see a pair of RCA outputs, and you've got yourself a coax, optical, and USB inputs, and a Bluetooth aerial port with a screw-in aerial. To the far right is a barrel port for a USB-loaded power cable. That is, you add your plug directly to the USB connector on the other end of this cable. You will need to find your own USB plug, incidentally, so you'll need to budget for that. The only issue I had with the rear of the chassis was in fact this area and the length of the power lead, which to me is a tad too short at 1 meter. Now, of course, the importance of my criticism depends on you and your own setup, but the included 1 meter lead was a bit on the short side for me. I'm used to seeing leads spanning around 1.5 meters or longer, which allows the lead to run from an elevated shelf position to a power block on the floor below, without any of that dubious lead tension. Flipping to the top of the chassis now, and this is where the real action is. The top sports a circular touch control panel, within which you'll find the power button, the volume up and down, the next and previous menu options, left and right function switch, you got your mute, and menu settings, plus a relatively small OLED screen in the center. Now, I would have liked to have seen a larger screen, but to be honest, the example used here is perfectly usable and readable. The menu offers the usual array of user-selectable filters directly from the DAC chip within. You get the usual 7 in all. I chose the catchily named linear phase slow roll-off, but I encourage you to make some sort of choice at the very least. Do not leave the filter as is in the default position, because at least to my ears, the choice does affect the final sound quality. If you're familiar with my own DAC reviews, you'll know I'm not really a fan of user-defined filters, or their labeling and presentation. But if I must select one, then filter 3 is the one I'd opt for myself. Again though, please sound test them for your own hearing bias. The menu settings relate to Bluetooth on and off, screen on and off, and factory reset. The manual, ultimately a fold-out long piece of paper featuring a micro font, doesn't really explain how to navigate the interface. I wasn't particularly impressed with this paper streamer, but if you do wish to tackle the menu settings, then I would advise turning on your DAC, long pressing the mute button to enter the menu settings, then press the plus button to cycle through the menu itself. When you stumble across a setting you wish to change, press the lower arrow keys to change the menu selection, then long press that mute button to save your setting to memory. Inside the DS601 is a pair of ESS 9038 Q2M DAC chips supporting up to 32-bit 768 kHz or up to DSD512. Bluetooth reaches version 5.0 and supports codecs such as aptX HD and LDAC. One point of note, there is no remote included in the box, or at least I didn't get one. There was also no indication that there was an app recommended for use with the DS601. Again, at least I didn't get any. So operation was only possible via the chassis interface. Now, I did ask the company for advice on this point, but well, I'm still waiting for a reply. Available in black, the unit spans 115mm by 115mm by 25 and weighs in at a mere 484 grams. So how does this one sound? Well, let's go to the sound quality tests and we'll find out. And welcome to the sound quality tests for the Lavaudio DS601 DAC. And I started by hooking the DAC itself up to my Audiolab 6000 CDT, and I played a Mark Knopfler CD called Sailing to Philadelphia. This is a year 2000 release on the Mercury label, and I listened to the title track, which has the guest vocalist, a certain James Taylor. First impression, well, the mids move towards a slightly clinical presentation. The mids are not exactly bright, but they're certainly not neutral either. Now, I did tweak the internal filters, which didn't really help at all, except to confirm that my filter choice was the correct one. I did stay in the menu settings though, and I switched off the Bluetooth feature, because you can, as I said earlier, you can turn off Bluetooth. And this option did actually help. The effect was subtle, yet the change was there, and switching off the Bluetooth option did open up the mids a little, aiding treble too, which was a little tinny at this particular point. Even so, switching off Bluetooth didn't really swing the overall personality of the mids enough to move the pendulum towards, say, full neutral. As I say, I wouldn't use the word bright here, but you can hear during Knopfler's guitar solo when strings are plucked, there's an overemphasis that hangs in the air. The same effect is present when the vocals move towards any sort of crescendo. For many users out there, of course, this effect will not be an issue. In fact, if you prefer a slightly more solid state effect in the upper frequencies, then this sound presentation will be wholly welcome. The effect does add emphasis in the upper mid-range detail, so That subtle detail is brought out into the open, front and center, and it's fully exposed. More, bass receives added precision, which, sure, might remove some of its more naturalistic feel, but it did give bass an additional impact and solidity. I then moved to a more energetic piece and Nectar's Remember the Future on the Eclectic label, originally released in 1973, which stressed the bass impact and the push towards mid-range emphasis. Actually, the move from the pastoral Knopfler track towards Nectar also led me to feel that this DAC would probably work better in the rock genre, adding corners to those guitar solos and bombast to the bass. Again, there was plenty of detail on offer here. Nothing was hidden across the soundstage. I then turned Bluetooth back on, selected the aptX HD codec, and played the Doves The Universal Want, and I played the title track. Now, Bluetooth sounded broad and quite large and quite impressive, you might say, in terms of its physical size and musical presentation from this rather spacious soundstage. Even so, the mids found it hard to keep control. The mid-range emphasis not only remained to mirror the effects I mentioned earlier, but because we're talking about an imperfect compressed stream, that is Bluetooth, the effect was actually accentuated. Vocals were pushed towards actual clinical brightness this time, with guitar chords sounding a little harsh at high volumes, while percussion, well, that was a mite thin and weedy. So I moved the codec and I moved from aptX HD to LDAC, and well, actually, LDAC single-handedly saved Bluetooth on this product. It was like moving from single-ended mode to balanced. That was the effect of the sound. The mids settled a lot via LDAC, grounding themselves to offer a measure of stability. The presentation was certainly not neutral. The mids remained slightly forward and moving towards clinical, but frankly, aptX HD was really not listenable. It was, as it were, not fit for purpose. LDAC certainly was, though. Even for those who admire solid-state sound, I would not recommend aptX HD on the 601 DAC. LDAC is certainly the codec to go for, and I would strongly recommend using an LDAC supporting player if this DAC is in your sights. Here, LDAC-derived bass remained powerful but organic in its naturalistic presentation, much more representative as a lower frequency. I finally turned to Jazz and St. Thomas, a track from Sonny Rollins, played at 24-bit 96K via USB, which actually sounded the most neutral of all the outputs in this test. Yet, even here, the mids sounded a little out of control. It was as if you were talking to somebody who was on the brink of a nervous breakdown, right in front of you, but is desperately trying to keep it all together. It's just that you can see the cracks. All is basically okay, but the cracks keep on showing, and you're waiting for the whole thing to come crashing down. That was USB on the DS601. Basically okay, but not. So, how do I conclude this particular review? Well, let me give you a few final thoughts, then we'll do some pros and cons, and then I'll give you a rating. Lavaudio's DS601 is a well-made, weighty, nicely packaged DAC that offers enough features to satisfy any digital fan. The sound quality across the board, USB, RCA, coax and Bluetooth, is neither strictly balanced nor neutral. Anyone hoping for that specific level of presentation will be disappointed here. Saying that, for those who lean towards solid-state play, the DS601 will definitely be of interest. Mid-range emphasis will lift detail from the mid-range floor, while added bass focus will push the basic low frequency power to the fore. Just be sure to come at Bluetooth with your LDAC codec switch to the on position and you'll be fine. Pros and cons. First up in the good section was the mid-range detail. There was certainly plenty of it and nothing was hiding in any dark corners. LDAC Bluetooth, well, that was a real highlight in terms of streaming performance in a Bluetooth manner, of course, but I was very happy with LDAC overall. Finally, I was very happy with bass. There was certainly impact, and as I said, I think this DAC would work well in a rock environment. Over to the bad section now. Well, there were no remote facilities, which I found rather surprising. Like I say, maybe it was just me. Maybe the company had a remote and I just didn't get it. However, I saw no indication in the instructions that one even should be included. That solid state emphasis, well, it's certainly not something I look for, so I put this in the bad section. However, if you like your solid state sound, well, maybe this one should be in the good section, hey. The aptX codec, that's another bad one. You would think that aptX HD would, at the very least, sound, well, decent, but not here. It just sounded pretty bright and horrible. So, a mixed bag, you might say. A decent DAC, but maybe one that should not receive an award, and I won't be doing that here. And that's it, folks. Thank you very much for staying to the end of this video. And if I could ask you before you go, now come back. Just click on those buttons down there for me, would you, before you go and put the kettle on? The subscribe and, of course, the like button. That would be very nice of you if you can do that for me. In the description down below, there are hot links, you might call them, chapter headings, so you can navigate around this video. There's other links to my webpage, my Facebook group, and my Patreon page, which I think I've mentioned before, is now really a hub. Everything I do on YouTube, everything I do on my website, and everything I do in terms of unique posts on social media will appear, always now appears on Patreon. That's where all of my work actually appears. So if you want to find out what I'm up to and you don't want to lose out, you don't want to miss anything, check out Patreon. Patreon, of course, also has lots of unique items over there in terms of text features, buys, guides, and video. Anyway, I will be back on Friday for a hi-fi news, etc. And there's lots of goodies in there as per usual. So I hope to see you then on Friday. Until that time, folks, I'd like to have your company, of course. Until that time, bye-bye for now.